Within hours, General Scott's army entered the Plaza de Armas, the heart of the capital, in triumph. Some resistance did come from an unexpected quarter. Santa Anna had emptied the jails, and the prisoners joined thousands of beggars and indigents coursing through the streets. Only a few had weapons. Most could only heave stones at the invaders.
Sad to say, this generous effort by the lower classes was bitterly denounced by the privileged classes, people who could look with indifference on the humiliation of their country if they could only preserve their own interests and comforts. Guillermo Prieto.
As the Americans tightened their grip on the capital, Santa Anna resigned his presidency. Manuel de la Peña y Peña, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, became president of Mexico. Within a month, Peña y Peña ordered Santa Anna court-martialed and stripped of his command. Wanted by his own government and pursued by U.S. soldiers, Santa Anna finally fled to exile in Jamaica. In a farewell message to the country, he defended himself with a familiar blend of self-pity and pride.
Fellow citizens, misfortune has deprived me of the incomparable satisfaction of presenting to you a splendid victory. But never have I committed a crime against my country. A good name, when I am gone, is the height of my ambition. I have wished all that is great and glorious for Mexico, and to obtain it, I have not spared even my own blood. This you know, and will do me justice.
Even with U.S. forces in control of Mexico City, Winfield Scott faced a perilous situation. The United States Army had never before occupied a foreign capital. All that had happened to now, the sacrifices on both sides, would mean nothing without a treaty. It was the moment that Peace Commissioner Nicholas Trist had been waiting for, an opportunity to claim his place in history. But before the talks could start, Trist received a stunning dispatch from Washington. He had been fired.
October 6, 1847. The President, believing that your continued presence with the Army can be productive of no good, has directed me to recall you from your mission. He has determined not to make another offer to treat with the Mexican government. They must now sue for peace. James Buchanan, U.S. Secretary of State.
Interim President Manuel de la Peña y Peña urged Trist to stay. For weeks, Mexican leaders had struggled to form a government stable enough to even attempt negotiations.
En este momento se hace necesaria para los
At this time,
mexicanos.
it was necessary for the Mexicans to negotiate because they were afraid of losing all of their territory.
Mexico, Trist was trusted by both sides. Without him, everyone feared the negotiations would collapse. Pressed by both Scott and Peña y Peña to remain, Trist made his decision. In a condescending 65-page letter, he informed Buchanan of his intention to disobey his president.
If the present opportunity be not seized at once, all chance of making a treaty at all will be lost, probably forever.
Trist knew his response would take weeks to reach Washington, and more weeks would pass while an angry reply worked its way to Mexico. Meanwhile, he would try to negotiate a peace. The talks lasted 2 months, but by late January of 1848, Nicholas Trist and the Mexican peace commissioners had agreed on most of the terms of a treaty. The United States would pay Mexico $15 million. The lands of Upper California and New Mexico would be ceded to the United States.
The Mexicans fought very hard not to cede New Mexico. They fought to keep Southern California, which was also more inhabited by Mexicans, And above all, they fought for the area from the Nueces to the Bravo.
These were the lands over which blood had first been shed. But here Trist would not give in. The border with Texas would be drawn at the Bravo, the Rio Grande. For the Mexicans living in the territory transferred to the United States, there would be a choice. They could stay on their land and choose either U.S. or Mexican citizenship, or they could leave. Most would choose to stay. On February 2nd, 1848, Trist and the Mexican commissioners met in the town of Guadalupe Hidalgo, near the Basilica of the Virgin of Guadalupe, the patron saint of Mexico. Here they signed the document that would become known as the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The treaty arrived in Washington on February 19th. Polk was still incensed at Trist's insubordination. But the president was also worried that extreme expansionists would try to prolong the war. Finding the treaty itself acceptable, Polk submitted it to the Senate without changes. He knew that ratification would face strong opposition from those who wanted to take all of Mexico. But there were others in the Senate who feared the consequences of granting citizenship to Mexicans. Among them was John C. Calhoun of South Carolina.
We have never dreamt of incorporating into our union any but the Caucasian race, the free white race. The greatest misfortunes of Spanish America are to be traced to the fatal error of placing these colored races on an equality with the white race.
In the end, the moderates prevailed, and the U.S. Senate approved the treaty. The United States' dream of manifest destiny was now a reality. From the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean, the nation had become a transcontinental power. Now it was up to Mexico to ratify the signed treaty. President Peña y Peña confronted extremist factions of his own in the Mexican Congress. Some delegates argued for continuing the war. Too many had sacrificed too much to accept defeat.
When the war between Mexico and the United States was over, it left a profound frustration among the Mexican people, because common people, everyday citizens, had seen their neighbors, their brothers, and ordinary soldiers die in a war that, for all the bloodshed, had resulted in the loss of half of Mexico's territory.
At the beginning of the war, Manuel de la Peña y Peña had called for peace. Now he would preside over the dismemberment of his nation. It was, he said, his journey to the grave. Even so, he urged the Mexican people to accept the treaty.
The people have an incontestable right not to have to suffer more. The truth is that a fertile and beautiful part of our territory is being ceded. I have no wish to obscure the truth, much less to deny the pain I feel at the separation from the Mexicans of California and New Mexico. The territories have not been given up for the sum of $15 million, but to recover our ports and invaded cities, to bring order to a people who have not ceased to suffer for 37 years. Let us do the right thing. Let us strip off the veil that has prevented us from seeing the reality of things. Let us make a mighty effort so that our children will not curse our memory.
On May 30th, 1848, the Mexican Congress approved the treaty. The war was officially over.
It was the end of a dream, the end, finally, of the greatness of New Spain, which, although it had faded, traces still remained. Now, suddenly, it was obvious that all that was history.